last week, Tuesday, the president of Korea, Lee Jae-myung, spoke about certain unnamed religious organizations, right? And asked his Minister of Legislative Affairs whether it was possible for religious organizations to be disbanded under Korean law, similar to the way that the Japanese courts right now have issued a disbandment order at the district court level, and currently they're considering whether or not to issue that again at the higher court level. He asked, they're doing this in Japan. What about us? Are we able to force religious organizations to disband? And at that time, I said, well, okay, he did this in front of cameras. Okay, he did this in front of cameras. So I said last week, I think, this is probably meant as a warning. So you guys, you got to dial down your rhetoric and behave yourselves. I thought that was the meaning of that mention last week. Well, turns out that it's actually much more serious than I thought last week, because today, Tuesday, he mentioned certain unnamed religious organizations again at a second cabinet meeting, and this time it is much, much more serious. And today's mention, we'll go through it in just a minute, but to give you the bad news first, or I don't know if it's good news or bad news, but anyway, to give you the main point first, it is clear that the president has made an executive decision that the Family Federation has got to go. It has got to go onto the dust heap of history, and it will not survive. That is his decision that he has made. Now, the Korean media contacted the Family Federation, and some leaders there, speaking anonymously, have said, no. He's talking about some other religious organization. All right. Maybe you know better than everybody else. Okay. Anyway, so let's take a look at a newspaper article on today's cabinet meeting and see what a professional journalist has summarized here. Okay. Again, he's not naming any names, all right? So anyway, let me give you the headline here. I have to do this in order to give you the headline. So, President Lee seeks the Unification Church dissolution for illegal acts. This is the Chosun Ilbo. Chosun Ilbo is at least one of the top three newspapers in Korea. You have the Chosun, and usually it's among the top three, it's sort of listed first. So basically, I think a lot of people consider it to be the top newspaper in Korea. You have Chosun, and then the Chungang, and then the Tonghang Ilbo. And traditionally, Cho Jung-dong, these have been sort of the top three newspapers in Korea. Like maybe New York Times, Washington Post, and I don't know what number three would be in the U.S., but, Wall Street Journal, something like that, maybe, I don't know. So anyway, this is among the top three and perhaps even the top one newspaper in Korea. And this is their headline here. President Lee seeks unification dissolution for illegal acts. So let's see. Let's bring this up a bit. See what we can see here. Okay. President Lee Jae-myung stated on the 9th, that's today, regarding the dissolution of religious organizations, if they engage in reprehensible acts that violate the Constitution and laws, they should be dissolved. The president made these remarks during a cabinet meeting held at the Yongsan presidential office that morning, that is to say this morning, after asking Cho Won-chul, Minister of Government Legislation, whether the government had reviewed the possibility of dissolving the religious groups for illegal activities such as political interference. This marked the second consecutive cabinet meeting where the president had advocated for the dissolution of religious organizations. Now, when the president mentions something like this, even once, that's a pretty big thing, right? And that is something that really gets people's attention. Mentioning it twice in a row. And also, if you watch the video of this, he's speaking with a very determined tone and his body language, basically. And obviously, he has an enemies list. And Family Federation is basically, on that list, pretty high. In fact, it's high up on that list for whatever reason, all right? And, it's clear that he's going to go after Family Federation with the full weight and force of the Korean government. And remember, hey, listen, the people with the guns make the rules. And this is not something that op-eds by former House speakers of the United States or spiritual advisors to President Trump can do anything about. We're way beyond that. We are way beyond that right now. And let's suppose that he's not talking about the Family Federation, that he's talking about another religious group. Well, other religious groups in this kind of a situation would basically fall on their knees and beg forgiveness and say, we promise to be good, in this all this kind of thing. Just tell us what we need to do in order to convince you to let us survive. That's what they would do. But the Family Federation is not like that, right? We have the head of the Family Federation saying, I am the mother of the universe, and all of you are, you need to treat me properly. So very, very different from what is called for in this situation in the context of South Korea's political culture. And every time she opens her mouth, she just makes people more and more angry. She doesn't even realize it. She thinks that people are going to fall on their knees. So anyway, let's continue here. Addressing Minister Cho, President Lee said, "Did you follow up on my previous instruction to review measures for dissolving religious groups that interfere in politics and use illegal funds for suspicious activities?" When Minister Cho replied, "We reviewed and reported it," the president responded, "I didn't receive it," and asked, "What is the conclusion?" And Mr. Cho trailed off, saying it's difficult to discuss the conclusion in a public setting because this is a transparent meeting. It's a live broadcast. President Lee insisted, "Even if we discuss other matters later, first tell me whether dissolution is possible or not." So he said, "Just give me the conclusion, yes or no. Can I dissolve these people?" In response, Minister Cho replied, "The dissolution of religious organizations is not a constitutional issue, but a matter of applying Article 38 of the Civil Code under current circumstances. Dissolution is possible only if a religious group persistently commits severely illegal acts at an organizational level. We need to confirm whether the actual conditions meet this criteria." Okay, so he's this guy. The minister is a lawyer. Okay, so he's maybe I think trying to tell the president to slow down a bit here, because we do have laws in this country. But President Lee, he's not going to have any of that. President Lee then stated, "Whether it's a foundation or an individual, if someone commits crimes or engages in antisocial acts, they face sanctions. Similarly, if foundations or incorporated associations engage in antisocial acts that draw public condemnation, they should be dissolved." He also asked, "Does the dissolution authority lie with the competent government agency, even though the court makes the final judgment on whether grounds for dissolution exist under civil law? Does the property belong to the government?" Oh, yes. That is where he's going. That is where he's going. He wants all the assets of the Family Federation. Minister Cho replied, "Especially I suspect the palaces in the palaces in Chongpyong. Okay. It depends on the organization's articles of incorporation. If not specified, the property is transferred to the government. Earlier on the 2nd, in other words, last week, Tuesday, President Lee had instructed officials to report on which agency should handle this issue, citing Japan's dissolution order against a religious foundation that systematically interfered in politics. This led to speculation that the remarks targeted the Unification Church, as its leader Hakcha Han Hakcha, and others were recently indicted for allegedly providing bribes to former First Lady Kim Gon-hee, spouse of former President Yoon Suk-yeol, and Kwon Song-dong, a People Power Party lawmaker. Okay, so that's all that they have. Now, there was actually a little bit more to this conversation that I saw, that I got from the video. In discussing, how this works, the president said, in Japan, the government has to go to the court and ask the court to dissolve the organization. But here in Korea, he said it's different. The government can make the decision to dissolve it, and then the organization, in other words, the Unification Church, for example, or Family Federation, for example, has to then go to court to get the court to nullify that government order. So it first gets dissolved, and then they go to court. This is the way the president stated. And I don't know if that's true or not. But and then he asked, so which ministry is actually responsible? Which ministry would give that dissolution order? And the minister here said, well, that would be the Munchebu. So the I think that's the Ministry of Culture and Sports. I think it is. Religion is considered culture, and so it comes under the Ministry of Culture. So the Ministry of Culture would issue that order, and then the Family Federation, according to the president, and I don't know if that's true, but Family Federation would have to go to court to get the court to stop that or to suspend that order or to nullify that order somehow. And I think it was very telling that he talked about what happens to the assets, what happens to the property. Now, until April of 2013, I was working. I was an employee of the Tongil Foundation, and this is one of the foundations that existed at that time in Korea. And it's been 2013, so more than 12 years. So I don't know how the legal structure exists now. They may have changed everything. I don't know. But in the past, there were a number of foundations or shall we say legal entities, nonprofit organizations. And of course, the church was one. Okay, the church was one. But the church actually didn't have all that much property on its own. Of course, church buildings and so forth. But as far as I can remember, the church itself really basically just church buildings and, in the land on which the church buildings were built. But the Tongil Foundation, where I was an employee, had a lot of property. And the Tongil Foundation owned controlling interest in a number of the newspaper, the Segilbo newspaper, the Ilhwa, ginseng tea company, the Yongpyong Resort, and a bunch of other companies. And then Chongpyong was a separate foundation. And so the property in Chongpyong, I think, was kind of a mixture at that time, and they've probably changed it. But at that time, it was sort of a hodgepodge mixture. It wasn't just one property; it was a whole lot of different properties. So I don't know which foundation the president intends to go after, or which foundation he can go after. Right? It all depends. He's talking about he's talking about illegal money or something like that, right? Illegal money that was used or that was used for illegal purposes. So I guess that would be whatever foundation that money came from would be the target of any dissolution action. So we'll have to wait and see. And I don't think he knows exactly the structure of the Family Federation right now. So we shall see, but it's clear that he is going to come down on the Family Federation pretty hard. And the question, of course, then is how far is this going to extend? You know, after he gets through with the Family Federation, who else is he going to come after or go after, right? And we will have to wait and see, but we shall see. Yeah. But one thing is clear from today, and that is that Hak Ja Han is not getting out of jail anytime soon, if at all. If at all. I said previously that there was a significant probability, that she would spend the rest of her life in jail. And I think that probability is even more significant than before. I'm not making a prediction because I don't know how the justice system actually works, but you know, the way, you know, the separation of powers is kind of vague, shall we say? Is that the right word? So I think the courts will take their cue from the executive department, much more so in Korea than in some other countries. So yes, and like I said, but every time she opens her mouth, she just makes people more angry. And she doesn't seem to understand that. She doesn't seem to realize that. And not only that, but the people who are advising her or supposedly advising her are doing a terrible job of helping her, or terrible job of protecting her interests. I mean, I don't, you know, there have been some visits to the prison and so forth and so on, but what is it, 40,000 or 46,000, mostly Japanese, at this, what, you know, to outsiders appears like a fortress in the hills, you know, outside of Seoul. Of course, and so last week the president used the expression "religious war." That if we don't do something about this may develop into a religious war. Today, he did not use that expression, but it's clear that Family Federation is basically done for, in his mind, and he's made that decision, and he's going to make it happen one way or another. So we will have to see how that develops over the coming weeks and months. All right. So